नमस्कार मनोरमा एजुकेशन चैनल को स्वागत जनाई आज वीडियो आरंभ करिवा।
सो हेलो फ्रेंड्स, आज आम इंग्लिश बुक रो चैप्टर 4 रे थिबा फ्रॉम द डायरी ऑफ एनी फ्रैंक रो क्वेश्चन आंसर आरंभ करिवा। वर्तमान क्वेश्चन नंबर 1 कोन अछि देखबा। व्हाट मेक्स राइटिंग इन ए डायरी ए स्ट्रेंज एक्सपीरियंस फॉर एनी फ्रैंक? तो यार आंसर हेबो एनी फेल्ट दैट राइटिंग इन ए डायरी was a strange and unusual experience for her, as she had never written anything personal like that before. Moreover, she thought nobody would be interested in reading her diary entries. Question number 2. Why does Annie want to keep a diary? Aaron said, Annie wants to keep a diary as she does not have a true friend. Therefore, she decided to keep a diary and consider it her companion. She calls her diary Kitty and shares her feelings with it instead of merely stating facts in it. Question number 3. Why did Annie think she could confide more in her diary than in people? Your answer. Annie believes that Pepper has more patience than people. She also mentions that she does not have a true friend in whom she can confide. She liked to talk about ordinary everyday things, and she seemed not to get closer to any of the friends she had around her. So she decided to write and confide in a diary. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ନେକ୍ସଟ ଓରାଲ କମ୍ପ୍ରିହେନ୍ସନ୍ ଚେକ୍ର କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ୍ ଆନ୍ସର୍ ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବା। କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ୍ ନମ୍ବର 1. Why was Mr. Casing annoyed with Annie? Why did he ask her to do? Our answer. Mr. Casing was annoyed with Annie as she used to talk frequently in class. He gave her extra homework, asking her to write an essay on the topic a chatterbox. Question number 2. How did Annie justify her being a chatterbox in her essay? Aaron said she gave strong arguments to justify her being a chatterbox. She argues that talking is a student's trait. He writes that she will try to better herself, but she is almost sure she will not be able to cure herself of the habit since her mother talked a lot and there's not much you can do about inherited traits. Question number 3. Do you think Mr. Casing was a strict teacher? Aaron answer. Mr. Casing was an old-fashioned teacher. He was not really strict but expected discipline and silence in his class while teaching. When Annie used to talk in class, he punished her and gave her extra homework to write an essay on a chatterbox. When Annie wrote a convincing essay on it, he accepted it with a good laugh. However, when Annie continued talking, he punished her again by asking her to write another essay on an incorrigible chatterbox. However, during the third lesson, he had finally had enough and gave the third essay entitled Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. He was trying to play a joke on her. However, she came up with a brilliant poem and he read her poem in class, adding his own comments. Therefore, in regard to these events, Mr. Casing cannot be entirely labeled as a strict teacher. At the end of the lesson, he can be seen as a fun-loving, amiable person. Question number 4. What made Mr. Casing allow Annie to talk in class? Your answer. Mr. Casing, Annie's maths teacher, used to get annoyed as Annie talked too much. Every time he gave extra homework to her in the form of essays, she could justify her talkative nature. However, on each occasion, he was impressed by her arguments. He took her final poem in a light spirit as a joke and had a good laugh about it. Finally, Mr. Casing accepted that Annie would always be that way. Hence, she was allowed to talk in class. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ thinking about the text ର questions ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିବା। Question number 1. Was Annie right when she said that the world would not be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old girl? Her answer. Annie Frank felt that no one would be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. No, she was not right in saying so. In fact, her diary was published after her death under the name The Diary of a Young Girl and got a lot of recognition. Question number 2. There are some examples of diary or journal entries in the before you read section. Compare this with what Annie writes in her diary. What language was the diary originally written in? In what way is Annie's diary different? So here answer है वो Annie's diary was originally written in Dutch and was later translated into different languages. Her diary was different from the others in many aspects. Firstly, she named her diary Kitty and considered it her only true friend in whom she could confide. She treated it as another person listening to her daily accounts instead of only stating facts. She wrote all her stories in it. She started by writing Dearest Kitty and ended the account by writing Yours Annie. Her diary was a lot more personal than the other diaries. Question number 3. Why does Annie need to give a brief sketch of her family? Does she treat Kitty as an insider or an outsider? The answer above. Annie Frank came up with a saying, Pepper has more patience than people. She usually sat depressed and all alone, even though on the surface she has everything. She does not have a true friend with whom she can confide her feelings. Therefore, she decides to write in a diary and gives a brief sketch of her background. She talks about her adorable father, compassionate mother, grandmother, and loving sister, Margot. She treated her diary Kitty as an insider as she used to share her thoughts and feelings with her. She wanted her diary to be her best friend. Question number 4. How does Annie feel about her father, her grandmother, Mrs. Cuperus, and Mr. Cassing? What do these tell you about her? Your answer. Annie has fond memories of her father, grandmother, Mrs. Cuperus, and Mr. Cassing. How she represents them in her diary reveals that Annie had good relations with them. The first person she mentions in her diary is her father. Annie felt her father was the most terrible father she had ever seen. Annie had moved to her grandmother's house when her father emigrated to Holland in 1942. When her grandmother died, Annie missed her deeply. She wrote in her diary that no one knew how often she thought of her grandmother and still loved her. In the sixth form at the Montessori Nursery School, her teacher was Mrs. Cuperus, the headmistress. They were both in tears at the end of the year as they said a heartbreaking farewell. Mr. Casing was Anit's math teacher. He used to expect discipline from his students and did not like when students talked in class. He used to give extra homework to Annie when she was found talking in class. However, Annie could justify her talkative nature whenever Mr. Casing punishes her. On each occasion, he was impressed by how she presented her arguments. All these incidents saw Annie's deep bond with people. Everybody was attached to her, and even Mr. Casing could not help but laugh at her essays and acknowledge her smartness. Question number 5. What does Annie write in her first essay? Answer. In her first essay, titled A Chatterbox, Annie wanted to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. She thought about the topic and wrote 3 pages on it. She argued that talking was a student's trait and that she would do her best to keep it under control. However, she was almost sure she would never be able to cure herself of the habit since her mother talked as much as she did. There was not much that one could do about inherited traits. She submitted her essay to Mr. Casing, and he had a good laugh reading her arguments. Question number 6. Annie says teachers are most unpredictable. Is Mr. Casing unpredictable? How? Your answer. Annie felt that a quarter of her class should be kept back and not promoted to the next class. However, she also felt teachers were the most unpredictable creatures on earth. Mr. Casing, Annie's old-fashioned maths teacher, could be termed as unpredictable. He used to be annoyed with Annie for talking too much in class. However, after giving several warnings to her, all Mr. Casing did was assign her extra homework. She had to write an essay on a chatterbox. In this way, he tried to play a joke on her. Each time that he asked her to write such essays, she wrote very well. She kept giving impressive arguments in her essays. One could not have predicted that he would take all the jokes in the right spirit. Finally, when she wrote a funny poem, he accepted her talkative nature and had a good laugh at her writing. From that day onwards, Annie was never stopped from talking, and Mr. Cassing started making many jokes in his classes. Thus, Mr. Cassing can be considered unpredictable. Question number 7. What do these statements tell you about Annie Frank as a person? So friends, ମୁଁ ଏହାର ଆନ୍ସର ଲେଖିଦେଉଛି, ତୁମମାନେ ଦେଖି ଦେଖି ଲେଖିଦେବ, କାରଣ ଏହାର ଆନ୍ସରଟି ବହୁତ ଲଙ୍ଗ ଅଛି, ତେଣୁ ଭିଡ଼ିଓଟି ମଧ୍ୟ ବହୁତ ଲଙ୍ଗ ହେଇଯିବ। आज ପାଇଁ ଏତିକି। Thanks for watching my video.